does intuitive eating lead to weight gain? And if it does, what do you do with this information? How do you know if you actually want to do it? And how do you navigate some of those fears? These are really, really valid and common questions that I get. And honestly, there's a lot of misinformation and confusion out there about intuitive eating. Even on YouTube alone, I have taken a look at all of the videos that are there. And if you're wanting to pursue intuitive eating, they likely leave you feeling more confused than informed. So I'm going to be talking about whether or not intuitive eating leads to weight gain. And after all of the information that I provide to you, if you're still interested in pursuing intuitive eating, what do you do? What do you do when you feel afraid of your body changing in shape or size? Because of course you do. How could you not fear, if you're giving up dieting and deciding to not restrict anymore, how could you not fear weight gain? How could you not fear your body changing in shape or size? Considering the culture that we exist in. Diet culture makes us afraid, so afraid of our body changing, of gaining weight, and we honestly end up doing everything we can do in our power to try to pursue weight loss, to try to maintain a certain kind of body, to try to get as close as possible to being in a certain size. And that ends up destroying our relationship with our body and with food. And so intuitive eating often sounds really awesome. Finally, you get to give up dieting. Finally, you get to stop having a fraught relationship with food. But what happens to your body in the process? So let's get into it. Before we dive in, my name is Catherine Metzeler. I'm a dietitian, certified intuitive eating counselor, and I help people to create peace with food and their bodies so that all of it takes up less headspace and you can live your life with more joy, abundance, presence, and freedom. You definitely want to take a listen to this. So I want to name a couple of truths up front that I think are really important in this conversation about intuitive eating. The one that I think is the most important, and if you stick around after I say this, I'm so glad that you've decided to stay, and if you don't, I'll understand, which is intuitive eating is not and was not created to be a weight loss tool. Intuitive eating is not a diet, it's not a lifestyle program. In fact, the whole idea around intuitive eating and the reasons why it was created was to help you get out of that dieting cycle, get out of cycles of restriction and then binging and then feeling shame. It was meant to challenge diet culture and dieting and all the things that you've been told about food and about bodies and help you to create a pathway towards freedom around food and with food and hopefully with your body too. So it really challenges that paradigm that you likely have been taught. And in order to embrace the 10 principles, which are part of intuitive eating, in order to embrace those principles, you have to, or at least intuitive eating asks, that you put the rigid control that you might have right now around trying to control your body shape and size to the side, because we can't create peace and freedom with food while simultaneously pursuing weight loss. The other piece of this as well is that if you gain weight in the process of pursuing intuitive eating, becoming an intuitive eater, this does not mean that you have done something wrong, that you are unhealthy, that these beliefs are part of diet culture and they're just not true. If you're in a place where you really believe, which makes sense, that you will be unhealthy, that you're a bad person, you name it. There's other things that come up when we think about gaining weight. Just know that it's possible to unlearn some of those beliefs, to really challenge your own internalized weight stigma, your own beliefs about your body. It is not an easy process, but I promise you that it's helpful. And I share this because I want to put all this into some context before I offer you some things that you can do if you are afraid of gaining weight. The other thing that I want to offer, if you are thinking about pursuing intuitive eating and wondering if it's going to lead to weight gain, the truth is we don't know what's going to happen to somebody's body in the process of pursuing intuitive eating, but there's a couple things that I want you to consider that happen pretty frequently for folks that come into intuitive eating, specifically as it relates to weight gain, and that is if you have been dieting for some time, restricting your food intake, and not allowing yourself true freedom and permission to have enough food, a variety of foods, and to allow yourself to have the foods that normally you limit your intake around, you come into intuitive eating already at a weight lower than what your body wants to be at. And what we call that in the medical field is weight suppression. And this is regardless of what size body you are in. Body diversity is a normal, natural part of being human, and likely your body, when coming into intuitive eating, if you're starting at that place, might not be in the place that it wants to be. Now, this doesn't mean that the range in which your body wants to be is a weight that you'd like to be, and that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother video where we can talk about weight cycling, we can talk about set point weight theory, but for the purposes of this video, I really want to emphasize that if you're coming into intuitive eating, having dieted and restricted your food intake and not having had enough food to support your body, the likelihood of you gaining weight is high. But this also might likely, I can't say for certain, but it likely might be a really good thing for you. Oftentimes in our culture, we associate weight gain with being unhealthy, but we don't think about weight gain as potentially being something that's very healthy and supportive for you. So it is possible that you will gain weight in the process of intuitive eating because your weight has been suppressed for so long. The last thing that I'll say about this, and I think that this is an extra important point, is that for a lot of people, intuitive eating leads to what we call weight stability. And why does that matter? Why is stabilizing our weight important, especially if we are pursuing creating peace with food, if we value the well-being of our body? Because again, we want to keep thinking about all the things that we are told about fat on our body being directly causational to having poor health. And that relationship just does not exist, even though that's what you've been told, okay? So why does weight stability matter in the context of intuitive eating over time? Because what happens a lot of times, we'll start off intuitive eating, we might gain weight, it's a possibility, but then over time it allows us to get to a place where our weight remains stable. This is important because we know now, and we are learning more and more of the harms of what we call weight cycling. It used to be called yo-yo dieting, which is where your weight will go up. When you gain weight, you'll lose a bunch of weight when you go on a diet. Then you stop the diet because diets cannot be maintained for the majority of people. Then you gain the weight, plus you gain even more because that's what happens in the context of restricting your food intake. And then you lose a bunch of weight again, and then that cycle just keeps repeating itself. And you may have experienced weight cycling in your life. And we know that it's so harmful for the body. A lot of what we've blamed historically on body size and body fat, we are realizing is coming as a result of weight cycling. Things like the development of type 2 diabetes, elevated cholesterol, elevated blood pressure, all these things that we're told is because of our body size, we're understanding is likely a result of weight cycling. So if intuitive eating ends up allowing you and your body to be at a stable place, we know that that is health promoting. So can I say that you will gain weight in the process of starting intuitive eating? No, because nobody knows you and your body and your experience. Maybe even you don't know what's going to happen. And that uncertainty can be very unsettling. And I think that's why you and many others have some apprehension about sticking with intuitive eating, starting intuitive eating, becoming an intuitive eater, because we honestly don't know. And diets and diet culture provide so much certainty, right? That's the offering, that's the carrot that is dangled in front of you. This promise of certainty. If you just do the things that it says, if you just check the boxes as you go along, then you'll get all the things that you want. You'll get the body you want, you'll get the relationship you want, you get the job you want, you name it. There's endless promises. But the reality is, if you are watching this video, likely you're struggling with your relationship with food, and you probably know, or there's some part of you that knows, that all of that is nonsense and that you've been lied to, that your body can't maintain the kinds of things that are often recommended, maintain a very low caloric intake, maintain not having a variety of foods, maintain not getting access to certain foods, maintain the stress and anxiety of what happens when you are constantly on diets, which is really harmful for your body. So Now what? What do you do with this? What happens if, okay, let's say it does lead to weight gain, could lead to no weight gain, could lead to nothing happening to your body. We don't know. There's uncertainty, and that sucks going into it. So if you have fear, which you likely do, of gaining weight, what can you do in order to deal with, manage, and navigate that fear if you're still interested in pursuing weight loss? Because they're happening usually parallel to one another, and that's to be expected. The fear of weight gain and the desire to want to become an intuitive eater and stop the endless hamster wheel of dieting and feeling afraid of food. The first thing that I want you to do is to really unpack and challenge your beliefs around body fat and body size being associated with being unhealthy. I have mentioned this a couple times already. Part of existing in diet culture means that you likely have gotten to a place in your life where you are afraid of body fat, afraid of gaining weight, and you also may have experienced all kinds of things in your body and because of your body in this world. If you are, for example, in a larger body, you may experience weight stigma on a daily basis. You might have experienced doctors or clinicians treating you poorly. And nonetheless, no matter what size body you're in, it can be very helpful, and I actually think essential, to unpack your own beliefs about body size. And you might be saying, well, how am I supposed to do that? Everything that I've been told is the mainstream information. Well, some of the ways that you can do this, free ways, is starting to listen to podcasts that use evidence as a way to support their work. And I'll link these in the show notes below. But listening to podcasts like Maintenance Phase, looking at pieces of research to support that actually weight loss doesn't lead to well-being and leads to lots of disordered eating and sometimes the development of eating disorders. Really understanding that body size does not equal health and well-being, that what we eat and how we move only contributes a really small portion to our health and well-being. A much larger portion of that are things like social determinants of health. The next thing that I want you to do is really take a close look at what you are currently having to do to maintain your body shape and size. And if health is something that you value in this conversation, it might not be, because health is not a moral imperative. Totally okay if not. But if it is, it's helpful to look at the ways in which dieting is likely, and restriction, lifestyle programs, we can call it, it's all the same thing, is likely impacting your health in a negative way. When we're not getting enough food to support our energy needs, when we're not eating enough, when we're not eating a variety of foods, our body honestly suffers as a result. In addition to this, think about all the anxiety and stress that you might be experiencing. I was going to say experiencing, but you may or may not be experiencing. The anxiety and stress that you experience because of the foods that you're eating, that is very common in this dieting culture, will cause more harm to your body and your well-being than any food ever could. That's a really important point that I want you to take with you. But just expansively, looking at all the stuff that you have to participate and do or not participate in because of the dieting lifestyle program restriction that you're having to engage in. Think about time with friends. Think about freedom on vacation. Think about your relationship with your children, if that applies. Think about all the ways in which having to follow a very specific way of eating is impacting your life. And I imagine as you take a closer look at that, it will help you to make some decisions here. Do I want to continue living my life in this way, missing out on experiences, being really rigid with my food, not being able to show up fully with all of my presence, constantly feeling fear? That does not outweigh the potential of weight gain. I could talk endlessly, honestly, about the things that creating peace with food could offer to you, but I think it's actually even more impactful and important that you take a look at it, that maybe you write it down and really assess, what do I have to do right now in order to maintain this diet and this lifestyle program? How is this impacting me? And do you want to continue living your life like that? Decide that it is worth pursuing making peace with food because of the way that restriction and dieting steals life from them in the process. The last and third thing that I want to offer to you, if you're feeling afraid of gaining weight in the process of starting intuitive eating, is to normalize this fear. I really want to emphasize this, and I know it sounds kind of maybe simple and basic on the surface, But considering the culture that we exist in, and considering your lived experience, and considering potentially the hardships that you face because of your body size, it makes so much sense that you would fear gaining weight. It makes so much sense. And add to that, if you have spent most of your life, or a majority of your waking hours and days throughout your life, pursuing weight loss, this can be very scary, the idea of letting go of the pursuit of weight loss. Now, does this mean we don't still want to? No. But this idea of kind of putting it on a shelf temporarily is just really scary. And I think the more that you can normalize this fear of your body changing, the better able you are to address and unpack your relationship with both your body and in particular with food. That in order to create peace with food, we have to give up dieting and restricting our food intake, which might mean along the way that your body will gain weight. And for a lot of people, there's fear there. And for a lot of people, there are very serious consequences, which may mean that you may or may not decide to pursue intuitive eating. The cool thing about this is that you get to decide what works best for you, what you want to do, if you want to stick with it, if you don't. I see intuitive eating as a framework, something that you can read, follow, learn from. It's definitely not a diet. It's definitely not a lifestyle program. It is a way of unlearning all the things that you have been taught from diet culture and from dieting, and relearning a way to connect to your own intuition that has been completely broken by diet culture. You were born with a felt sense of intuition when you were hungry, when you were full, as to what you wanted, and at some point that was taken from you. So the whole idea behind intuitive eating is to give that back to you. And unfortunately, in the process, you may experience some body changes, but you may not. And your work likely will be to tolerate that uncertainty, all the while deciding whether or not this is something for you. But over time, it likely will lead to weight stability, which we know is health promoting, and it will lead to you having a more peaceful relationship with food where all of this no longer feels stressful for you. I think more than anything, and in summary, what I want for you is for food and your relationship with your body to change. And I want you to feel a greater sense of peace and ease at minimum with your relationship with food. And if you're continuing to diet, and if you're continuing to restrict, and if you're continuing to feel fear around food, you are not experiencing a peaceful relationship with food. And it's likely taking up a lot of headspace. Intuitive eating can be a way to create more peace with food. And for some people, they decide that it's not something that feels particularly helpful. And I have created another video on that, so definitely check that out. It may be that this isn't the best fit for you, and that's okay, but I really want to, one, normalize the process of gaining weight with intuitive eating. And more specifically, it's not necessarily related to intuitive eating, right? It's not the fault of intuitive eating. We really want to change the place where we're putting the blame, which is onto diet culture. We really want to shift that because diet culture has harmed you. Diet culture has made you think that you should pursue weight loss. Diet culture has made you think that eating a certain amount of calories, restricting your caloric intake is good for you. It is definitely not, and many other harmful messages. So if your body changes in the process, this is not a result of intuitive eating. This is a result of years of possibly being weight suppressed, not getting a variety of foods, and likely not getting enough to meet your body's needs, which doesn't mean that you're not going to be afraid of gaining weight in the process. It just means that there's a lot more nuance to this, and we want to be working towards normalizing the fear so that you're then able to unpack what is there inside of you, the beliefs that we have, the internalized beliefs, and then begin to challenge them where you can. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this video and you found it valuable, I am always so grateful to give a like below. Please check out the free resources that I have for you below, and I will link some things that you can take a look at for you to begin challenging some of those internalized beliefs that you might have about your body shape and size. And I will see you back here soon.